Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare. Husband sits down to eat dinner and asks his wife how the baby is. She says, "I don't know. You tell me." Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Serious, ex-prisoners of Reddit. Who was the most evil person there, and what did they do that was so bad? Number 1. Commenter. My mom was locked up with Selena's murderer. And we all know what she did. Every Mexican woman wanted to kill her, so they kept her away from everyone. Person B. Damn effing Yolanda. So your mom never met her? Commenter. Nope. She never spoke to her. But I remember as a kid visiting my mom and she whispered for me to look over at the other side of the room. And there that puta was. Looking just like the actress in the movie. My mom said she never spoke to anyone besides her attorney. I mean, I guess the death threats were crazy. Especially from some woman who bit her husband's penis off. Person C. I went to high school with her niece. No one knew she was related to her until one day everyone was talking randomly in class and somehow Selena came up. Someone mentioned how they hoped Yolanda died and she just broke down crying. Everyone was confused and she had to confess that they were related. Apparently her whole family has shunned her, but it's still a sore spot. Everyone in that room was sworn to secrecy, so naturally the entire school knew within a day. Number 2. I was 16 but tried as an adult, so they kept me in a 21 and under pod. Malvo, the DC sniper, was in my pod. Also, one of the first people I saw in a chain gang was Charles Manson's brother. Swastika on his forehead and everything. Number 3. One of the women on my wing cut up her lover and put his body parts in an empty TV box, then put the TV box on his mother's doorstep. I used to let her thread my eyebrows every fortnight until I found out what she was in for, lol. There was also a girl on the same wing who told me she was in for missing probation. I got on well with her. When I got out I started Googling everyone and found out she was in for trafficking children. I was mortified. Number 4. Not in prison, but I was an intern in a public defender's office over 10 years ago. The one that stands out was a juvenile locked up for the 3rd time for molesting kids aged 12 to 16. Kid was obese and clearly very damaged. This was a juvenile detention center that was often used as a babysitter by crackhead moms, accusing the kid of a crime and getting them locked up for the weekend so they could go on a bender. He was serving a sentence. I was warned going in there that he could turn violent at the drop of a hat, and the attorney was nervous about bringing a young female in, but I insisted. Kid looks me straight in the eye and says, "Don't let me out, I will do it again." I can't stop. He was hunched over, dead eyes and completely serious. Number 5. Not sure about the most evil but interesting story. When I did time I was bunked up with a guy who had stabbed his uncle to death, molested him. Guy was insanely mean, but when lockup came, he was super nice to me. He was 23 but couldn't read or write, so we would dictate letters to his girlfriend, and I would write them for him. Number 6. I was in a women's prison. The new inmate told everyone she was in for tax fraud. Couple of days later, she gets the crap beaten out of her and doesn't leave her cell again. Food gets taken in by prison officers, and eventually she gets ghosted out. Turns out she was on our side and both her husband and son were on the male side for running a child porn ring. Those guys had been put straight in the VP wing, but most female prisons don't have enough sex offenders to have one. It was one of the prison officers who told some of the inmates why she was in. They wanted her to be taught a lesson. The offenses were awful. She was fully part of it and was responsible for acquiring a lot of the victims as she was trusted by people. Youngest victim was her niece's 3-month-old who had to be hospitalized due to trauma. Number 7. I was a detention officer for a while, and I never looked too much into what the kids did. Especially if they were well behaved. There was this one kid that was just great. Always helpful, and never caused problems. One night in the control room I mentioned to a coworker how awesome this kid was helping close up the kitchen, and she says, "Have you seen what he's in for?" I had not. So she showed me that he was actually in for molesting his 18-year-old sister. Number 8. I'm 20 and I was in and out juvie from 15 to 18 till I went to county jail. The worst person I came into contact with was a boy 15 who shot his stepmother, slit her throat, beat her head in with a blunt object, wrapped her in sheets for the father's roommate to find her, then he shot him. Happened in McMinnville, Oregon. Other than that, a lot of people molesting siblings, and making threats to shoot up the high schools in the area. That's Yamhill County for you. Number 9. This rich kid stabbed his friend in the chest, killing him, but he was on Xanax and weed at the time and doesn't remember anything of it other than his friend on the floor dying. The mad thing is this guy, 18 years old, actually got off with the murder and found not guilty, although was sent down for just under 2 years for possession of a knife. His parents were quite wealthy and it was a big case in the UK. Basically his barristers were the best money could buy and he said that's how he got off. He didn't have any remorse for his actions, which was made to think made him a pretty F-up person. It's a funny one though because he actually seemed a nice guy until he would talk about the killing and just didn't care what he had done. Nobody else in the prison had ever killed anyone to my knowledge, as it was a lower cat prison, but he was only there for possession of a knife. Number 10. During my time in healthcare there was a security officer that looked like a skinhead but he was not. He was huge, like 6'5", around 370 pounds. Tattoos covered his body but they were only just noticeable because he wore full-length shirts with collars. I got to know him and found out he was a retired correctional officer. He worked more than 20 years. He shared some crazy stories. He talked of outright unbelievable stuff, but of all the things, this was one of the most horrendous inmates he spoke of. He was a corrections officer in Texas and was over the death row inmates. He said this one was there for kidnapping a mother and her 2 daughters. After raping and killing them, he drove them out to the desert to drop their bodies off. One of the girls somehow survived and made it back to the road where a trucker found her. I'm pretty sure they already executed this guy, and on the day of his execution, this security officer at the time telling me this, told the guy, "I'm going to go home and have a great meal and think of you dying." Number 11. When I was in jail my cellie was a guy that tied his old lady down to their table and tried to carve "Do not resuscitate" into her chest. Halfway through the cops showed up because the neighbors could hear her screaming. I tried as politely as I could to tell the captain that I don't mess around with woman beaters and asked for a block transfer. Thankfully they put me on a work release, which was awesome because I got to work in the kitchen and deliver food to the different blocks. No food hall meals were brought to you, and you never left your block except to go to the basketball CT or the library. Well, one day I'm serving food to one of the solitary cells, and as soon as the slot is opened a drenching wet magazine gets thrown out. Turns out it's covered in piss and the woman inside is the chick my previous cellie carved up. Turns out she stabbed her son with a syringe of her blood and she was inside too. Some crazy stories all around, but that couple far and away were the craziest people I saw. Number 12. Commenter. My friend's dad was a volunteer chaplain, taking care of prisoners' religious needs, at the county jail. He came into our criminal justice class to talk about working at a jail. He told us that the most evil people at a jail are the ones that show no remorse for their actions. He saw the guy that killed the foreign exchange student that attended the University of Utah, and he told us that the guy didn't seem to care at all. He was calm about everything. Person B. Kid in my history class shot up my school last year, killed 2 and injured 4. I remember when the cops got him, they got footage of him being taken into custody and a reporter asked him, "What did you do?" He just started laughing maniacally and goes, "I killed a couple kids. So F it up." Number 13. Commenter. I wasn't an inmate, I was an officer, so my opinion might be disqualified. But at a facility I worked at we were a level 5, which is maximum security. Lots of people who had life without parole and just a bunch of different things happened. One guy was on a documentary because he traveled across several states and killed around 5 people total. He was pissed because the documentary blamed him, but he always tried to say his father hitting him as a child made him kill these people. Then there's the old guy who molested his young grandchildren and was furious that he was sent to prison cause they were his grandkids so he could do whatever he wanted. He had also molested his children when they were growing up. Lots of sick things in a max security prison, and those would be nothing when compared to a federal supermax. Person B. My mom was adopted by a woman who was sexually abused by her brother. The brother actually sexually abused many members of the family, and everyone knew what he was doing. My grandma was abused by this guy, but she still sent my mom to stay with him and his family during the summer. And when my mom told her what was going on, she never stopped sending my mom to stay with him. Well, my mom told me she was molested by her uncle from literally as young as she can remember, and stopped when she was 15. She also told teachers and other people, but no one believed her. Everyone said, "You shouldn't talk about your uncle like that, he's a good man." Everyone thought he was such a good man because he was very involved with the church. Her uncle ended up killing himself. But I've always hated my grandparents for letting my mom go through that. Number 14. Commenter. I was with Christian Knighton in LA County Jail. 2 cells over from him. He was trying to get noticed and raised his hand to hit someone on the Southsiders' bad news list. He stabbed his cellmate a gang of times in the neck and chest, killed him. This was years back. He later became a Mexican mafia member but dropped out because he himself ended up on their hit list. I wouldn't say he was the worst though. LA County has a lot of crazy vatos, Bloods, Crips, Asian gangsters. You name it. Later I ended up in a high desert state prison. One of the Hispanic groups are called the Norteños, Northern Mexicans. It was very brutal how they removed their own people for getting out of line. They have a policy that they can't stop stabbing until the guards break it up, which can take forever. I watched them as they stabbed a guy damn near 60 times for using drugs. Massacred that dude. They have a policy of no drug use. Person B, do they consider weed a drug? Commenter, no, they can smoke weed and drink lightly. They really only mean hard drugs like heroin, meth, pills, etc. Reasons being they have to have healthy bodies and be in tip-top shape due to California prison yards being so hectic and dangerous. Prison is a big mental game as well, healthy body, healthy mind as they say. Person B, interesting. Probably too big of a risk to have heavy addicts with sensitive information or ties that could be exploited. Commenter, yes, when I was at Salinas Valley the cops were getting super disrespectful and thought they were big shit. These particular individuals were part of a gang created by prison guards called the Green Wall, who are known to be corrupt as F. They went too far and beat down a Southern Mexican for no reason, put him in the hospital and covered it up. The Southsiders put a green light, a hit, on all prison staff. So if a Mexican were to get close to a guard they were to stab them. There were 300 Southern Mexicans in the prison, so the guards seemed pretty scared. Eventually a guard got his throat slit and lived. Some female guard got knocked out and stomped on pretty good and had to get airlifted out to a hospital. She never came back. A lot of guards are as bad as inmates and instigate the violence. Number 15. This lady was married and her husband cheated. He had a full-blown affair, and ended up with a love child. Somewhere along the line the wife is babysitting the husband's illegitimate child. He comes home from work, sitting down to eat dinner and asks her how the baby is. She says, I don't know. You tell me? This bitch ended up killing the baby, cooking it, putting it in the food and fed it to him. She's doing 2 life sentences. This is in Arizona, by the way. She looks like the devil, her eyes are literally black and she looks like she has no soul. It takes a lot to creep me out, but this lady's vibe is one of the darkest things I've ever felt in my entire life. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.